The first message arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through the deep space communications array at the Goldstone Observatory like a whisper from another world. Dr. Sarah Chen had been monitoring routine satellite transmissions when the signal cut through the static, a pattern too deliberate to be natural, too complex to be random. "Mike, you need to see this," she called to her colleague, Dr. Michael Rodriguez, who was hunched over his coffee and a stack of overnight reports from the Very Large Array in New Mexico. The signal pulsed in mathematical sequences, prime numbers, then the Fibonacci sequence, then something entirely new. Sarah's hands trembled as she isolated the transmission and began the painstaking process of decoding what would later be known as humanity's first contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. Within hours, the message had been forwarded to every major space agency, university, and government on Earth. The decoded content was both thrilling and terrifying in its simplicity. People of Earth. We are the Kythera of the Andromeda spiral. Our world dies. Our star fails. We have observed your species for 7 cycles of your sun. You show compassion to your own kind in times of crisis. We have nowhere else to turn. We request sanctuary for our people. We offer knowledge and friendship in return. Please respond. Time grows short. The message included star charts, mathematical proofs that demonstrated their technological capabilities, and images of their dying solar system. Their sun, a red giant, was collapsing faster than their scientists had predicted. The Kythera had maybe 5 Earth years before their world became uninhabitable. President Maria Santos stood before the United Nations General Assembly 3 days later, her voice carrying across the packed chamber into billions watching around the world. The debate that followed would reshape human civilization. "This is not a decision any single nation can make," she declared. "We are being asked to open our planet to an entire alien civilization. The implications are staggering." The Kythera had been careful in their initial communication. They numbered roughly 50 million, a massive population by any standard, but they emphasized their peaceful nature and their desperate circumstances. They had included biological data showing their basic compatibility with Earth's environment, though they would need technological assistance to survive. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the world's leading xenobiologist, had spent sleepless nights analyzing the data. "They're carbon-based, oxygen-breathing, and roughly humanoid," she reported to the emergency session of the World Council. "But they're adapted to a much cooler climate and lower gravity. They would need environmental suits and habitat domes, at least initially." The debates raged for months. Religious leaders grappled with the theological implications. Economists calculated the costs. Military advisors worried about security. Environmental scientists concerned themselves with the ecological impact. But it was the second message from the Kythera that changed everything. Sarah Chen was again the first to receive it, this time with the entire world watching. The alien transmission was shorter, more urgent. "Friends of Earth. We understand your concerns. We do not wish to burden you. We ask only for sanctuary for our children and elders, perhaps 10,000 of our most vulnerable. The rest of us will remain and face what comes. We have begun preparing memorial archives of our civilization. Please. Time is running out." The image that accompanied this message showed Kythera families, beings that looked remarkably like tall, slender humans with slightly elongated limbs and large, expressive eyes. They were embracing, their alien faces showing emotions that needed no translation. The world's response was swift and decisive. Within weeks, the Haven Project was born, a massive international effort to prepare for the arrival of 10,000 Kythera refugees. Construction began on habitat domes in remote locations, the Australian outback, the Canadian Arctic, the Sahara Desert, and the Siberian tundra. Sarah Chen found herself at the center of the communications effort, working around the clock to maintain contact with the Kythera and coordinate the rescue mission. The aliens had provided technical specifications for their transport vessels and estimated arrival times. They would travel in small groups over the course of several months, their ships designed for one-way journeys. "They're literally burning their boats," Mike Rodriguez observed during one of their late-night monitoring sessions. "Once they leave, there's no going back." The first Kythera ship was detected entering the solar system on a crisp October morning. The small vessel, about the size of a city bus, carried 50 refugees, mostly children and elderly, just as promised. Sarah watched the radar blip approach Earth with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Admiral James Harrison, commanding the hastily assembled International Space Monitoring Task Force, tracked the ship's approach from the Pentagon. "All readings normal," he reported to the Joint Command. "They're following the agreed-upon flight path exactly." The ship landed in the designated zone in Australia, its sleek hull gleaming in the desert sun. The first Kythera to set foot on Earth was a child, no more than 8 years old by human standards, who stumbled slightly in the unfamiliar gravity before being caught by an adult. Dr. Vasquez was part of the greeting committee, her heart pounding as she watched the aliens emerge from their ship. They were beautiful in their own way, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the sunlight. Their faces were expressive, showing the same mix of hope and fear that any human refugee might display. The child looked around with wide eyes, taking in the strange new world, then pointed to the sky and spoke in their musical language. The universal translator, hastily developed from the mathematical language exchanges, rendered it as, "The sky is so blue here." Over the following months, more ships arrived. The Kythera proved to be everything they had promised: peaceful, grateful, and eager to contribute to their new world. They shared their advanced knowledge of energy systems, helping to solve Earth's growing power crisis. Their medical techniques revolutionized human healthcare. Their art and music enriched human culture. The habitat domes became thriving communities. Human children learned to play Kythera games, while young Kythera adapted to human sports. Scientists from both species worked together on projects that seemed impossible before first contact. Sarah Chen, now serving as the primary liaison between the species, often walked through the domes, marveling at how quickly the two peoples had adapted to each other. The Kythera had proven remarkably resilient, and their gratitude was evident in everything they did. "We owe you everything," Zarathul, one of the Kythera elders, told Sarah during one of their regular meetings. "Our children have a future because of your kindness." But even as the integration proceeded smoothly, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging worry. The Kythera had been monitoring Earth for 7 solar cycles, nearly 2 centuries of human time. They had seen humanity's wars, its struggles, its capacity for both great cruelty and great compassion. They had specifically mentioned humanity's tendency to help their own kind during disasters. What troubled Sarah was the precision of their request. 10,000 refugees. Mostly children and elders. A number that seemed carefully calculated not to overwhelm or threaten humanity. She shared her concerns with Mike Rodriguez during one of their evening walks around the Australian facility. "Doesn't it seem too convenient?" she asked. "They observed us for 200 years, and they ask for exactly the right number of refugees to make us feel good about ourselves without feeling threatened?" Mike shrugged. "Maybe they're just incredibly thoughtful. Or maybe they understand us better than we understand ourselves." The answer came 6 months later, in the form of a transmission that Sarah almost missed. It was buried in routine communications between the Kythera refugees and their home world, encrypted in a mathematical code that the universal translator hadn't been programmed to handle. Sarah worked for 3 days to crack the code, driven by an instinct she couldn't name. When she finally decoded the message, her blood ran cold. Phase 1 complete. Human response exceeds projections. Recommend immediate implementation of Phase 2. Begin fleet deployment. Target, Sol system. Humans have demonstrated sufficient compassion and technological capability to serve as suitable hosts for full population transfer. Begin preliminary subjugation protocols. The message was followed by star charts showing not 1 or 2 additional refugee ships, but a massive fleet, thousands of vessels carrying the remaining 40 million Kythera. Sarah's hands shook as she printed the decoded message and ran to find Admiral Harrison. The implications were staggering. The Kythera hadn't been lying about their dying world, but they had been hiding the true scope of their intentions. "We need to contact the president immediately," Harrison said after reading the translation. "And we need to warn the other nations. This changes everything." Within hours, emergency sessions were convened in capitals around the world. The Kithara refugees seemed genuinely surprised by the accusations. The 10,000 who had already arrived appeared to know nothing about any fleet or invasion plans. Zarathul, speaking for the refugee community, seemed genuinely shocked. "This cannot be true," she insisted through the translator. "We were told the rest of our people chose to remain and face death with dignity. We knew nothing of any fleet." But deep space monitoring stations around the world were already picking up the massive energy signatures of the approaching Kithara fleet. The ships were still months away, but they were undeniably real and heading directly for Earth. Dr. Vasquez found herself in the uncomfortable position of studying the refugees for signs of deception. "Either they're incredible actors," she reported to the Emergency Council, "or they're as surprised as we are. Their biological responses suggest genuine shock and distress." The truth, as it emerged through careful interrogation and analysis of intercepted communications, was more complex than anyone had imagined. The Kithara were not a unified species with a single government. They were divided into different factions, much like humanity itself. The refugees represented the peaceful faction, those who genuinely believed in coexistence and had been willing to accept exile rather than burden their hosts. But the dominant faction, led by someone called the Fleet Commander, had seen the successful integration of the refugees as proof that humanity could be easily conquered and their planet claimed. "We were used," Zarathul said bitterly, her large eyes filled with what could only be described as tears. "They used our children as scouts, our elders as spies. They told us we were saving our people's future, but they were really preparing for invasion." The approaching fleet was massive, bigger than anything humanity had ever imagined. The ships were not the simple transport vessels that had carried the refugees, but massive battlecruisers, each one carrying thousands of Kithara soldiers and equipped with weapons that could devastate Earth's cities. President Santos addressed the world again, her voice grim. "We face a choice that will define the future of our species. We can surrender and hope for mercy, or we can fight for our world. I know what our answer must be." The decision was unanimous. If the Kithara wanted Earth, they would have to take it by force. What followed was the most intensive military preparation in human history. Every nation contributed to the defense effort. Scientists worked around the clock to analyze Kithara technology and develop countermeasures. The refugee Kithara, despite their moral outrage at their own people's betrayal, provided crucial intelligence about their species' capabilities and weaknesses. Saracen found herself at the center of a different kind of communication effort, psychological warfare. Using her deep understanding of Kithara culture and language, she began broadcasting messages to the approaching fleet, trying to divide their forces and turn them against their leaders. "Your own people are here," she broadcast in perfect Kithara. "They came to us in peace, and we welcomed them. We offered them sanctuary when they were desperate. This is how you repay our kindness? By invasion and conquest?" The response came from the fleet commander himself, a being whose name translated roughly as Stoneheart. His message was cold and pragmatic. "Humans of Earth, you have shown kindness to our outcasts and weaklings. For this, we will be merciful in our conquest. Surrender now, and you will be allowed to serve as our workers and servants. Resist, and you will be eliminated. We have observed your species for 7 cycles. We know your capabilities. You cannot stand against us." What Stoneheart didn't know was that humanity had been busy during those 7 cycles as well. The refugee crisis had galvanized human cooperation in ways that decades of diplomacy had failed to achieve. The combined technological and military might of Earth was formidable in ways that even the Kithara hadn't anticipated. The first battle took place in the outer solar system, near Jupiter. Admiral Harrison, now commanding the hastily assembled Earth Defense Fleet, watched grimly as the Kithara advance scouts encountered humanity's first surprise, a minefield of nuclear-powered interceptor drones, each one guided by artificial intelligence and armed with kinetic weapons. "They're adapting faster than we hoped," Harrison reported as the Kithara ships began systematically destroying the drones. "But they're taking losses. Real losses." The psychological impact on the Kithara fleet was significant. They had expected to face a primitive, divided species. Instead, they encountered coordinated resistance and technology that, while different from their own, was devastatingly effective. Sarah's broadcasts were having an effect as well. Intercepted communications showed increasing dissent within the Kythera fleet. Many of the soldiers had been told they were coming to claim an empty world, not to subjugate a sentient species that had shown kindness to Kythera refugees. Your leaders lied to you, Sarah broadcast. They told you Earth was uninhabited. They told you we were primitive savages. Look at your own people among us. Look at how we have treated them. Is this the behavior of savages? The main fleet reached Earth's orbit on a cold December morning. The massive ships blotted out the sun, their alien hulls gleaming with unknown metals. For a moment, the entire planet held its breath. Then the second battle began. Admiral Harrison had positioned Earth's defense fleet in a complex formation that took advantage of the planet's gravitational field and magnetic environment. The Kythera ships were powerful, but they were designed for interstellar travel, not for combat in the unique conditions around Earth. All units, engage at will, Harrison commanded, and the sky lit up with weapons fire. The battle was unlike anything in human history. Ships fought in 3 dimensions, using the space around Earth as a vast battlefield. The Kythera's energy weapons carved through human vessels, but Earth's kinetic weapons and nuclear missiles found their mark as well. Sarah watched from the command center, her heart breaking as she saw ships from both sides spinning out of control, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. The turning point came when Zarathul and several other refugee leaders made a desperate decision. They commandeered one of the original transport ships and flew directly into the middle of the battle, broadcasting on all Kythera frequencies. Stop! Zarathul's voice rang out across the battlefield. Look what you have done. Look what you have forced these people to do. They welcomed us with open arms, and you have repaid their kindness with violence. The effect was immediate. Fighting slowed as Kythera soldiers heard the voices of their own people, the refugees they thought had been sacrificed for the greater good. We are alive, another refugee broadcaster. We are safe. We are free. These humans gave us homes, gave our children futures, gave us hope when we had none. And you come here as conquerors? The psychological warfare reached a crescendo when the refugee children themselves began broadcasting. Their young voices, speaking in the pure, musical tones of their native language, cut through the battle chatter like knives. Why are you fighting our friends? The humans gave us toys and games and taught us their songs. They built us playgrounds and schools. They showed us their blue sky and their green trees. Why do you want to hurt them? The effect on the Kythera fleet was devastating. These were not the voices of conquered slaves or desperate refugees. These were the voices of children who had found new homes and new families. Stoneheart's response was swift and brutal. He ordered his most loyal ships to fire on the refugee vessel, intending to silence the descent permanently. But his order was refused. Ship after ship in the Kythera fleet powered down their weapons and withdrew from the battle. We will not fire on our own people, came the response from one of the fleet commanders. Especially not to silence the truth. The mutiny spread through the fleet like wildfire. Within hours, Stoneheart found himself commanding only a fraction of his original force, the most fanatical and loyal of his followers. Admiral Harrison, recognizing the opportunity, broadcast a message to the entire Kythera fleet. To all Kythera ships, we offer you the same choice we offered your people months ago. Those who wish to live in peace are welcome to join us. Those who choose to continue this fight will be met with the full force of Earth's defenses. Choose wisely. The response was immediate. More than 3/4 of the Kythera fleet surrendered, their commanders requesting permission to land and join the refugee communities. They had seen enough of war and conquest. Stoneheart, left with only his most fanatical followers, made one final desperate attack on Earth's surface. His remaining ships broke through the orbital defenses and began bombing major cities, their energy weapons carving through buildings and infrastructure. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, London, New York, and Tokyo had suffered significant damage, and thousands of humans were dead. But Stoneheart's forces had been completely destroyed, their ships shot down by surface-to-air missiles and fighter aircraft. The fleet commander himself died when his flagship was rammed by a human pilot who had lost his family in the bombing. The pilot's final transmission was broadcast around the world, for everyone who can't fight back. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity faced a new challenge. The Kythera fleet had brought nearly 40 million refugees, far more than the original 10,000. But the circumstances had changed everything. They fought against their own people to defend us, President Santos said in her address to the world. They chose us over their own kind when the moment came. How can we do any less for them? The integration process began again, but on a much larger scale. The Kythera who had opposed Stoneheart proved to be valuable allies, their advanced technology helping to rebuild the cities that had been damaged in the attack. Their medical knowledge helped treat the wounded. Their engineering expertise accelerated human development by decades. Sarah Chen, now serving as the director of Human Kythera Relations, often found herself amazed by how quickly the two species had learned to work together. The children, especially, seemed to adapt with remarkable ease. They're not human or Kythera anymore, she observed, watching a group of mixed-species children playing in a park outside the Australian Habitat Dome. There's something new. Something better. Zara Thul, now serving as a cultural liaison, agreed. Our children will grow up knowing both worlds, both peoples. They will be the bridge between our species. But integration wasn't without its challenges. There were cultural misunderstandings, political tensions, and occasional conflicts. Some humans resented the rapid changes to their world. Some Kythera struggled with guilt over their people's initial intentions. The most difficult challenge was dealing with the Kythera who had supported Stoneheart but had surrendered rather than fight to the death. These individuals, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, were housed in separate facilities while their cases were reviewed. They followed orders, Dr. Vasquez argued during a heated debate in the World Council. Many of them were told they were coming to claim an empty world. They didn't know they were signing up for genocide. They were willing to conquer and subjugate an entire species, countered General Martinez, who had lost his son in the bombing of Mexico City. Good intentions don't excuse that. The solution came from an unexpected source, the Kythera themselves. Led by Zara Thul, they proposed a system of rehabilitation and service. Those who had supported the invasion would work to repair the damage they had caused, contributing their labor and expertise to rebuilding efforts. Let them prove their worth through their actions, Zara Thul suggested. Let them earn their place in this new world. The program was a success. Many of the former soldiers became valuable members of society, their guilt driving them to extraordinary efforts to make amends. Some became teachers, sharing their knowledge with human students. Others became engineers, designing new technologies that benefited both species. Sarah often visited the rehabilitation centers, talking with the former soldiers and trying to understand their perspective. One conversation, with a Kythera named Tekvar, stuck with her. We were told you were animals, he said, his alien features showing deep shame. We were told you were barely sentient, that you would be happier under our guidance. When we saw how you treated our people, how you welcomed them and cared for them, we knew we had been lied to. What changed your mind? Sarah asked. Tekvar was quiet for a long moment. My daughter, he said finally. She was one of the first refugees. When I saw her on the communication screen, playing with human children, laughing, learning your language, I realized that what we were doing was wrong. We were not liberating anyone. We were destroyers. The years that followed were marked by rapid change and growth. The combined knowledge of both species led to breakthroughs in medicine, energy, and space travel. Disease was virtually eliminated. Clean, unlimited energy became available to everyone. Humanity began expanding beyond Earth, establishing colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter with Kythera assistance. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The children who grew up in the integrated communities developed a unique perspective, seeing themselves as neither purely human nor purely Kythera, but as something new, citizens of a larger universe. Sarah's own daughter, born 5 years after the invasion, grew up speaking both languages and thinking in ways that neither species had imagined possible. She was part of the first generation to see the universe as a place of infinite possibility rather than infinite danger. She doesn't understand why we were ever afraid of each other, Sarah told Mike Rodriguez during one of their regular walks, now through a park where human and Kithara children played together under the supervision of adults from both species. Maybe that's the point, Mike replied. Maybe fear is something we learn, not something we're born with. The memorial to the victims of Stoneheart's final attack was dedicated 10 years after the invasion. It stood in the center of New Geneva, the new capital of the United Earth-Kithara Alliance. The memorial bore the names of all who had died, human and Kithara alike, including Stoneheart himself. "We remember all who died," President Santos said at the dedication ceremony, her hair now gray but her voice still strong. "We remember the humans who died defending their world, and we remember the Kithara who died following orders they didn't understand. We remember them all, so that we never forget the cost of fear and misunderstanding." Zarathul, now an old woman by Kithara standards but still serving as a cultural advisor, spoke next. "My people came to your world seeking sanctuary, and you gave it to us. When others of my kind came seeking conquest, you defended yourselves, but you also defended us. You showed us that there is a difference between strength and cruelty, between power and oppression." The ceremony was broadcast across the solar system, to the colonies on Mars and the research stations in the asteroid belt. Humanity and the Kithara had spread together across the void, their combined knowledge and resources making possible things that neither species could have achieved alone. But the most powerful moment came when the children's chorus performed, a mixed group of human and Kithara children singing a song that had been composed in both languages, their voices blending in harmonies that neither species had imagined possible. Sarah stood in the audience, tears streaming down her face, remembering that first message from the Kithara: "We request sanctuary for our people. We offer knowledge and friendship in return." They had gotten far more than they had asked for, and far more than they had initially intended to give. But in the end, both species had gained something precious, a future that was larger and brighter than either could have imagined alone. The story of first contact was taught in schools across the solar system as a cautionary tale about the dangers of assumption and the power of compassion. Children learned about the importance of keeping promises, the value of seeing through deception, and the strength that comes from standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. But most importantly, they learned that sometimes the greatest challenges lead to the greatest opportunities. The Kithara had thought humans would send aid, a simple gesture of charity toward refugees. Instead, humanity had sent something far more powerful, the offer of true partnership, defended with strength but guided by principle. As Sarah often told her students at the Integrated Academy, they expected us to be kind. They didn't expect us to be strong. And they certainly didn't expect us to be both. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity was no longer facing it alone. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them together, not as conquerors or conquered, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all, the exploration of existence itself. The Armada that had come to conquer had become a fleet of exploration. The refugees who had sought sanctuary had become pioneers of a new kind of civilization. And the humans who had offered aid had discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is the chance to earn redemption. In the end, the story wasn't about invasion or conquest. It was about the possibility of transformation, the chance for both species to become something better than they had been alone. The Kithara had been right about one thing: humans did have a tendency to help others in times of crisis. They had simply underestimated the scope of that help, and the strength that compassion could inspire. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and welcoming, and humanity and the Kithara faced them together, ready for whatever wonders and challenges might come. 25 years after first contact, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Deep Space Station Harmony, watching the construction of humanity's first interstellar vessel. The massive ship, nearly a kilometer long, was a marvel of combined human and Kithara engineering. Its hull gleamed with the metallic composites that the Kithara had perfected over millennia, while its propulsion system used human innovations in fusion technology. "The Voyager will be ready for launch in 3 months, announced Captain Elena Vasquez, the same Dr. Vasquez who had first studied Kithara biology, now commanding the mission that would take a joint crew to the Proxima Centauri system. Sarah smiled, remembering the frightened young scientist who had analyzed alien tissue samples in a makeshift lab. now Elena was one of the most respected officers in the solar fleet, her expertise in xenobiology making her the natural choice to lead humanity's first interstellar expedition. "Hard to believe it's been 25 years, Sarah said, running her fingers along the cool metal of the observation deck's railing. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that we received that first message." "And sometimes it feels like a lifetime," Elena replied, joining her at the window. "My daughter can't imagine a world without the Kythera. To her, this is normal." It was true. The younger generation had grown up in a world where humans and Kythera worked side by side, where children learned both mathematical systems and linguistic structures, where the greatest achievements of civilization came from collaboration rather than competition. The Voyager represented the pinnacle of that collaboration. Its mission was ambitious: to establish the first permanent human Kythera colony beyond the solar system. The target was a planet in the Proxima Centauri system that orbital telescopes had identified as potentially habitable. But the mission had another purpose, one that wasn't widely publicized. Deep space monitoring stations had detected signals from other star systems, faint, but unmistakably artificial. Humanity and the Kythera were not alone in the galaxy, and the Voyager would serve as both explorer and ambassador. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked Elena as they watched work crews of both species swarming over the ship's hull, installing the final components of the navigation system. "Terrified," Elena admitted with a laugh. "But also excited. We're about to become a truly interstellar species. The Kythera have been dreaming of this for centuries, and humans have been dreaming of it since we first looked up at the stars." The launch ceremony 3 months later was broadcast to every world and station in the solar system. President Santos, now in her second term leading the United Earth Kythera Alliance, spoke to the assembled crowd from the launch platform at L5 station. "Today, we take our first step into the greater galaxy," she said, her voice carrying across the vast crowd of humans and Kythera who had gathered to witness the historic moment. "We go not as conquerors, but as explorers. Not as a single species, but as partners in the greatest adventure ever undertaken." Zarathul, now bearing the title of Elder Ambassador, spoke next. Her voice had grown thin with age, but her words carried the weight of her people's hopes and dreams. "When we first came to your world, we were running from death," she said. "Today, we run toward life, toward possibility, toward a future that our ancestors could never have imagined. We go together, as one people, to see what wonders await us among the stars." The Voyager's launch was a spectacle that would be remembered for generations. The great ship's engines lit up the darkness of space, pushing it slowly at first, then with increasing speed toward the edge of the solar system. The journey to Proxima Centauri would take 15 years, even with the advanced propulsion system. But the Voyager was more than a ship, it was a symbol of what humanity and the Kythera could achieve together. Its crew of 200 included scientists, engineers, diplomats, and artists from both species. They carried with them the accumulated knowledge of two civilizations, ready to plant the seeds of something new on a distant world. Sarah watched the ship disappear into the depths of space, its lights becoming just another star in the vast tapestry of the galaxy. She thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, from those first desperate messages to the construction of an interstellar ark. The integration of the two species hadn't been without its challenges. There had been cultural conflicts, political disagreements, and occasional violence. Some humans still resented the changes that the Kythera had brought to their world. Some Kythera struggled with guilt over their people's initial intentions. But the benefits far outweighed the problems. Disease was virtually unknown. Energy was clean and abundant. The arts flourished as human creativity merged with Kythera aesthetics. Science advanced at an unprecedented pace as researchers from both species shared knowledge and perspectives. Most importantly, the children thrived. The generation born after integration showed cognitive abilities that neither species had achieved alone. They thought in ways that transcended the limitations of single-species perspective, solving problems that had seemed impossible to their parents. Sarah's own daughter, Maria, was part of that generation. Now 20 years old, she served as a junior researcher on the Harmony Station, working on projects that would have been incomprehensible to scientists from either species just decades earlier. Mom, you need to see this, Maria said, rushing into Sarah's quarters one evening several months after the Voyager's launch. Her excitement was palpable, her eyes bright with discovery. What is it? Sarah asked, setting aside the report she had been reading. We've been analyzing the signals from the Vega system, Maria explained, pulling up a holographic display that showed complex waveforms and mathematical patterns. The signals aren't random. They're definitely artificial, but they're not like anything we've ever seen. Sarah studied the patterns, her trained eye recognizing the signs of intelligent communication. Have you tried running them through the universal translator? That's just it, Maria said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The translator recognizes the mathematical foundation, but the language structure is completely alien. Not just different from human or Kythera, different from anything we've encountered. The implications were staggering. If Maria was right, they had discovered evidence of a third intelligent species, one that might be as different from humans and Kythera as both species were from each other. We need to contact the Voyager, Sarah said, already reaching for her communication console. Captain Vasquez needs to know about this. The message reached the Voyager 18 hours later, traveling across the vast distances of space at light speed. Elena's response came back equally quickly, understood. We'll adjust course to investigate the Vega system after establishing the Proxima colony. This changes everything. It did change everything. The discovery of the third species, which they began calling the vegans for lack of a better term, sparked a new wave of excitement and concern throughout the solar system. If there was one additional intelligence in the local region of the galaxy, there were likely others. The Kythera elders were particularly intrigued. Their historical records spoke of ancient legends about the Singers in the Void, mysterious beings who communicated through music and mathematics but had never been encountered directly. Perhaps they are real, Zarathal mused during a council meeting. Perhaps the galaxy is far more populated than we ever imagined. The revelation sparked a new age of exploration and discovery. Additional ships were commissioned, each one designed to investigate different star systems and search for signs of intelligent life. The solar system became a launching point for an interstellar civilization that grew more complex and interesting with each passing year. But with exploration came new challenges. The first warning came from the Voyager when it finally reached the Proxima system. Captain Vasquez's message was urgent and disturbing. We've found something here. The planet we were planning to colonize shows signs of previous habitation. Recent habitation. There are ruins, but they're not ancient. Someone was here within the last few decades, and they left in a hurry. The ruins were clearly artificial, but they weren't built by humans, Kythera, or any species they could identify. The architecture was strange, almost organic in its flowing lines and curves. Most disturbing were the scorch marks and blast patterns that suggested a violent end to whoever had lived there. It looks like they were attacked, Elena reported. Something drove them off their world, and recently. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Alliance. If there were hostile forces in the galaxy, humanity and the Kythera needed to be prepared. The peaceful exploration of space suddenly took on a more urgent, defensive character. Admiral Harrison, now in charge of the Solar Defense Force, began planning for contingencies that no one had wanted to consider. We need to assume that whatever attacked the Proxima colonists might come here, he told the Emergency Council. We need to be ready. The preparations were extensive but subtle. Defense platforms were built at the edge of the solar system, disguised as research stations. The civilian ships were equipped with more powerful shields and weapons. Most importantly, communication networks were established that could coordinate the defense of multiple star systems. The answer to the mystery came from an unexpected source. The signals from the Vega system suddenly changed, becoming more complex and urgent. Maria and her team worked around the clock to decode them, finally achieving a breakthrough that changed everything. They're not just random signals, Maria announced to the assembled council. They're a warning. The vegans are trying to warn us about something they call the Devourers. The translated message was terrifying in its implications. To all who hear this message, flee. The Devourers come. They consume worlds, consume life, consume hope. We have held them at bay for 1,000 cycles, but we grow weak. They move toward the spiral arm where you dwell. Prepare. Fight. Do not let them find you unprepared as we were. The message included star charts showing the movement of something vast and destructive across the galaxy. The Devourers, whatever they were, had been systematically destroying civilizations for millennia. They were heading toward the local cluster of star systems, and they would arrive within 50 years. Sarah stood before the assembled leaders of both species, her heart heavy with the weight of the revelation. "We're not alone in the galaxy," she said. "But we're also not safe. We have 50 years to prepare for something that has been destroying civilizations for thousands of years." The response was swift and determined. The peaceful exploration of space became a desperate race to build alliances and defenses. The Voyager was recalled to help establish contact with the vegans. Additional ships were sent to every nearby star system, searching for allies and resources. Most importantly, the integration of human and Kythera society was accelerated. The hybrid children, with their unique perspectives and abilities, were identified as potentially crucial to the coming conflict. Their education was intensified, their capabilities developed and enhanced. Sarah's daughter Maria became part of the first generation of what they called bridge minds, individuals who could think in ways that transcended the limitations of single-species perspective. They were humanity's and the Kythera's best hope for finding solutions that neither species could achieve alone. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of dangers. The peaceful first contact between humans and Kythera had led to something neither species had expected, not just friendship, but the responsibility to defend civilization itself against forces that sought to destroy it. As Sarah looked out at the stars from the observation deck of Harmony Station, she realized that the story was far from over. The Kythera had thought humans would send aid, and instead had received an entire armada. Now humanity and the Kythera together would need to become something even greater, the guardians of all life in their corner of the galaxy.